His own kids threw him out. Then a lawyer handed him the keys to something nobody had touched in 40 years. The train car sat on a dead siding in Harlan County, and inside it was a safe that hadn't been opened since 1981. And what was inside? Walter Coyne kneels beside a black iron safe in the dim boxcar, holding a yellowed envelope, and his hands are shaking so bad the paper rattles against his thumb. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me take you back 6 days, because you need to understand what this man had and what was taken from him before any of what happens next will hit the way it should. Route 421, a Tuesday, October, the kind of gray Virginia morning where the mountains look like they've been erased halfway up and the air tastes like wet gravel. Walter Coyne is standing on the shoulder with a garbage bag of clothes at his feet and his father's dented silver Zippo lighter turning slow circles in his left hand. He's 60 years old, 6'1", broad-shouldered but thinning, silver-white hair combed back from a face the sun has spent decades working over, pale blue eyes set deep, a faded olive-green canvas jacket, brown corduroy trousers worn soft at the knees, scuffed boots, $88 in a checking account he can still access, 0 in savings. And behind him, getting smaller in the side mirror of a black Cadillac Escalade, is the house he built with his own hands over 30 years. Keith drove him, his own son. 38 years old, sandy hair side-parted and combed like he was headed to a board meeting, slim navy sport coat, that slim black leather portfolio tucked under his left arm like it was part of his body. Keith didn't even get out of the car, just pulled over on the gravel, popped the rear hatch with the button on his key fob, and sat there while Walter lifted out the garbage bag. One bag. 30 years of living in a house you framed and roofed and plumbed, and it fits in one hefty bag. Keith rolled down the window, looked at his father the way you'd look at a dog that wandered into your yard. "Dad, this is better for everyone. You know that. The trust needs a clean transfer, and you being in the house complicates things." He said it warmly. He smiled. That's the thing about Keith. He always smiles. He smiled when he slid the trust documents across the kitchen table, smiled when he explained that putting the house in a family trust was just for tax purposes, Dad. Nothing changes. Smiled when the locks got changed 3 months later. Nothing changes. Sure, Keith. Nothing changes except your father's standing on the side of a highway with a garbage bag and $88 while you drive his house to a closing. Here's what happened. Claire, Walter's wife, died 7 years ago. Cancer. The kind that's fast and total and leaves a house so quiet you can hear the clock in the next room like a hammer. Walter kept working. Odd jobs, handyman stuff, the kind of labor that wrecks your back and pays in cash and doesn't come with a pension. Claire had been the one who handled the money, the paperwork, the future. Without her, Walter just kept going. Head down, hands busy, didn't notice the ground shifting under him. Keith noticed. Keith always notices when there's an angle. He and Walter's younger daughter Denise sat Walter down at his own kitchen table, the table he built from reclaimed oak, and explained that a family trust would protect the property and simplify things when the time came. Walter signed. He signed because his kids asked him to, and because Claire would have known whether it was a good idea, and Claire was gone, and he trusted the people she'd raised. His Social Security check, $1,412 a month, Keith had that deposited into a joint account. For convenience, he said, for simplicity. Then one morning, Walter drove to the hardware store and his debit card bounced. He called the bank. The joint account had been closed. Funds transferred to an account in Keith's name only. $88. That's what was left in the old checking account Keith forgot to close. $88 and a Zippo lighter and a garbage bag on Route 421, and his son's taillights disappearing around the bend toward Roanoke without so much as a brake tap. Walter didn't chase the car, didn't shout, didn't call Denise. Denise hadn't returned his calls in 4 months. He stood there on that gravel shoulder and turned the Zippo over in his left hand. Click, click, click. And he watched the mountains disappear into the clouds, and he said nothing because what was there to say? Then the phone rang. Not a smartphone, a cracked Samsung flip phone, the kind they stopped making a decade ago, tucked in the chest pocket of his canvas jacket. The number was Kentucky. A man named Fry, a probate attorney in Harlan County, speaking in that particular unhurried drawl that sounds like the man is being paid by the syllable. There'd been a final estate disbursement. Eugene Coyne, Walter's uncle on his father's side, died in 1981. 1981. The estate had been in probate limbo for 42 years over a contested clause nobody could untangle until the last of 3 other potential heirs died in a nursing home in Pikeville the previous spring. Walter was the last living heir. The bequest was 1 railroad boxcar, contents included, on a dead siding outside Everts, Kentucky. Assessed value? $1. Walter asked one question. Is there a bus that goes there? The Greyhound from Roanoke to Harlan cost $47. He did the math while he bought the ticket, standing at the counter with his garbage bag between his boots. 88 minus 47 is 41. At the bus station, he bought a sleeve of saltine crackers and a black coffee from a machine that smelled like it hadn't been cleaned since Clinton was in office. 41 minus 475 is 36.25. That's the number. Remember it. Everts, Kentucky used to be coal. Now it's nothing. Population 800 and shrinking like a puddle in August. The boxcar sat on a rusted spur line behind a collapsed coal tipple. Maroon paint faded to the color of dried blood. Weeds grown up past the wheel trucks. A padlock on the sliding door so rusted it looked like it had grown there. Walter stood in front of it with his garbage bag and his $36.25 and the Zippo turning in his hand. Dale Huckabee found him there. Or maybe Dale was waiting. Hard to tell with Dale. 5'6", barrel-chested, white hair brushed straight back, tortoiseshell half-moon reading glasses on a beaded chain, burgundy cardigan with that worn black pen clipped to the breast pocket. He ran the hardware store in town. He'd known Eugene. Dale handed Walter a can of WD-40 and a pry bar without a word of small talk. Then he said one thing. Your uncle was a particular man. Whatever's in there, he meant for it to be found by exactly one person. Dale left. Didn't watch. Didn't hover. Walter worked the padlock for 20 minutes. The WD-40 loosened it enough for the pry bar to do the rest. The hasp snapped. The lock hit the gravel like a dropped stone. Walter slides the boxcar door open for the first time and steps inside. The floor is thick with dust. Against the far wall, bolted to the planks with iron brackets, is a safe. And lying on top of the safe, undisturbed for decades, is a single sealed envelope with his name written on it, in handwriting he has never seen. The gray afternoon light fell through the open boxcar door in a single, pale column, catching the dust Walter had stirred with his boots. He stood over the safe with the envelope in his hands, his name written across the front in blue ink, the kind of careful penmanship that belonged to someone who'd learned cursive from a teacher who still believed it mattered. The paper was yellowed at the edges. The seal had held for decades. Walter slid his thumb under the flap. The glue cracked like old skin. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. He unfolded it with both hands, the dented silver Zippo shifting in his jacket pocket as he moved. The letter was short. Blue ink, same careful hand. It read, Walter, if you're reading this, they finally got around to giving you what's yours. I'm sorry it took so long. I tried other ways first. Start with the safe. The combination is your mother's birthday. E. That was it. No date, no last name, just the initial. Walter read it twice, then a third time, slower, his pale blue eyes tracking each word like he expected one of them to change. His mother's birthday. Lorraine Coyne, who left a 2-year-old boy in a crib in a rented house in Harlan County, Kentucky, and never came back. Walter didn't know her birthday. He didn't know her middle name. He didn't know if she was alive or dead or living 3 towns over or buried in a county plot with no marker. She was a word other people used when they wanted to explain what was wrong with him. That was all she'd ever been. He folded the letter and put it in his jacket pocket next to the Zippo. Then he turned to the boxcar and started searching. The workbench was bolted to the left wall with iron lag screws, the kind you sink with a ratchet and never expect to pull out. Above it, a pegboard, and every tool had an outline drawn around it in black marker. A claw hammer, a set of box wrenches, tin snips, a hand plane. The outlines were still there, but most of the tools were gone, sold or borrowed or stolen over the years. What remained was a coffee can of nails sorted by size, finishing nails in one section, common nails in another, roofing nails in a third, separated by cardboard dividers cut from cereal boxes. The man who'd organized this can had time and patience, and no one to spend either on. The shelves above the workbench held glass jars, screws, bolts, washers, wing nuts, all sorted, all labeled in the same blue ink on strips of masking tape gone amber with age. A transistor radio sat on the top shelf with its antenna bent at 45 degrees, dead batteries, a dial still set to a station that probably didn't broadcast anymore, and there, behind the radio, a tobacco tin. Prince Albert, red and gold. Walter pulled it down and pried off the lid. Inside was a Polaroid, a woman holding an infant. She was young, maybe 22, with dark hair falling past her shoulders and a smile that looked like it cost her something to give. The baby was wrapped in a white blanket, eyes closed, one fist curled against its own cheek. On the back, in that same blue ink, Lorraine and Walter, March 1963. His mother. Walter stood there in the gray light of the boxcar, holding a photograph of a woman he had never seen, not in a frame on a mantel, not in a shoebox, not anywhere. 60 years old, and this was the first time he'd looked at her face. She had his cheekbones, or he had hers. The birthmark on the right side of his neck, that pale thumbprint below his ear, she didn't have it. But the jawline was the same, square, set, like someone expecting to be hit. He turned the Polaroid over again. March 1963, his mother's birthday, March 14th. He knew it now because a dead man had written it on the back of a photograph and tucked it inside a tobacco tin and left it on a shelf in a boxcar on a piece of land nobody wanted. March 14th, 1941. Walter crossed to the safe. The dial was brass, tarnished, nearly black. He wiped it with his sleeve and knelt on the dusty floor. 03-14-41. Right, left, right. The dial was stiff, gritty, the mechanism fighting him like it had opinions about who should be opening it. First attempt, nothing. Second, nothing. He reset and tried again, and again. His fingers were cold and the numbers were small, and the dial skipped if he turned it too fast. 11 attempts. On the 11th, something inside the safe gave a heavy, oiled click, the sound of a lock that had been waiting, not broken. The door swung open. Stay with me here, because what Walter finds in this safe is going to change what you think this story is about. 4 items. A leather-bound ledger, dark brown, spine cracked. A stack of letters bound with twine. A cigar box, Roy tan, faded. And a small velvet pouch, navy blue, cinched with a drawstring. Walter reached for the ledger first. He opened it on the workbench and the spine popped softly, releasing the smell of old paper and something faintly like cedar. Eugene's handwriting. Every page. Meticulous columns. Date, name, amount, purpose. Page after page after page. Not a journal, not a diary. A record. $40 to Ruth Combs for heating oil, January 1967. $200 to the Bledsoe family for a funeral, March 1971. $85 to James Whitaker for truck repair, June 1969. $3,200 to Harlan County Hospital for Alma Creech's surgery, September 1974. $12 to a woman named Opal for school shoes. $26 for someone's electric bill in February. 237 names, 23 years, 1958 to 1981. The letters confirmed it. Walter untied the twine and spread them across the workbench. Thank you notes on lined paper. Updates scrawled on the backs of grocery receipts. A mechanic named Roy writing that the $150 kept his shop open through the winter. A woman named Delia writing that her daughter finished nursing school because Eugene had quietly covered tuition for 3 semesters. Photographs: a family standing in front of a new porch, a girl in a graduation gown, a man holding up a fish with a grin that took up his whole face. These weren't anonymous donations dropped in a church basket. Eugene knew every single person by name. He tracked every need. He followed up. Then Walter's boot caught a plank near the workbench that gave half an inch too much. He knelt down, pressed. The board flexed. He worked his fingers under the edge and pulled. A second compartment, a shallow wooden box nailed beneath the planks. Inside were 16 U.S. savings bonds, Series EE, purchased 1 per year from 1965 to 1981. Each one made out to Walter Dean coin. He lifted the stack with both hands and his arms began to shake. 16 bonds. 16 pieces of paper, each one the size of a dollar bill but thicker, stiffer, printed in that old federal green and cream with the Treasury Department seal pressed into the corner like a promise the government made before it forgot how to keep them. Walter sits on the boxcar floor with his legs stretched out in front of him, the stack fanned across both palms, and his arms are still shaking. Not from cold, not from exhaustion, from arithmetic. Because here's the thing about Series EE savings bonds: they're boring. They're the kind of thing a grandmother tapes inside a birthday card and you forget about for 30 years. But that forgetting is the whole point. Series EE bonds are purchased at face value. You buy a $50 bond, you pay $50. You buy a $100 bond, you pay $100. And then you wait. They mature over 30 years at a guaranteed rate, and if you don't cash them, if you just leave them alone in a cigar box under a floorboard in a boxcar nobody's opened since 1981, they keep accruing interest beyond maturity. They just sit there, getting heavier. Walter turns them over one at a time. The earliest is dated March 1965, $50. The next, March 1966, $50 again. The amounts climb slowly, 50, 50, 75, 75, 100 starting in 1972, and every single one was purchased in the same week, the 3rd week of March. Walter's birthday is March 19th. 16 bonds. Original face value investment? Approximately $1,200. That's nothing. That's a used car in 1975. That's 3 months of groceries for a man living alone in a railroad boxcar. But some of these bonds are over 55 years old. The dented silver Zippo turns over in Walter's left hand. Click, click, click against his thumbnail, while his right hand holds the bond from 1965. $50. Purchased 59 years ago. Compounding at the guaranteed rate, extended past maturity, accruing the penalty-free interest the Treasury allowed on bonds issued before 1980. That single $50 piece of paper is worth somewhere north of $600 now. The $100 bonds from the 70s are worth more. The later ones, less time but higher face value, still climbing. Walter doesn't have a calculator. He doesn't need one. He spent 40 years doing payroll math in his head at job sites, counting board feet, pricing materials, figuring change when the register was broken. Conservative estimate, the kind of number you'd get if you walked these into a bank and the teller punched them through the system with no fuss, $52,341. But that's the conservative number. That's the floor. With extended maturity interest on the pre-1980 bonds, with the compounding the Treasury guaranteed before they changed the rules, with the full accumulation of decades nobody touched, $327,412.31. Walter Dean coin is sitting on a boxcar floor with $36.25 in his checking account, holding $327,412.31 in paper. His arms haven't stopped shaking. Beneath the bonds, still in the shallow wooden box, sits a cigar box. Roy Tan brand, the cardboard soft and foxed with age, the lid illustration of a smiling man in a top hat nearly rubbed away. Walter sets the bonds down on the floorboard beside his knee and lifts the cigar box with both hands. It weighs almost nothing. Inside, a birth certificate. Eugene Albert Coyne, born September 3, 1925, Harlan County, Kentucky. A Norfolk Southern Railroad employment card, laminated in old, yellowed plastic, with a photograph of a broad-faced man in a flat cap squinting into the sun. The same face from the photographs on the wall. Older here, deeper lines, but the same steady eyes. A black and white snapshot, 3 inches by 5, of Eugene standing beside this very boxcar, the day he bought it. On the back, in pencil that's faded nearly to nothing, "Bought her today. $75 from Norfolk Southern Surplus, June 1957. She'll do. She'll do." 2 words from a man who looked at a rusting railroad car on a dead siding and saw a home. A deed of ownership, handwritten, notarized, stamped by the Harlan County clerk, for the boxcar and the 40-foot siding easement. Eugene's name in careful block letters, and beneath all of it, at the bottom of the cigar box, folded into thirds and held together with a rubber band that crumbles to dust when Walter touches it, court papers. 3 sets, 3 separate petitions filed in Harlan County Family Court. The first, June 1965. Petitioner, Eugene Albert Coyne. Request, full legal custody of minor Walter Dean Coyne. The judge's notation is 2 lines long. Petition denied. Petitioner is unmarried and employment is irregular. Railroad maintenance. Minor child is currently housed in an intact family unit. No evidence of immediate danger. No evidence of immediate danger. Walter reads that line twice. The intact household where he was fed last and hit first, where Harold's second wife locked the pantry at night, where Walter learned to sleep light because heavy footsteps in the hallway meant something was about to break. Second petition, 1968. Denied. Same reasons. Added notation. Petitioner has no permanent residential address. He lived in a boxcar. The judge looked at a man who'd built shelves and a wood stove and a life inside 40 feet of steel and decided that didn't count as a home. Third petition, 1971. Denied. Walter would have been 6 years old enough to remember. He doesn't remember anyone coming for him. He doesn't remember anyone trying. Have you ever held something in your hands that proved someone loved you before you even knew you needed it? That's what Walter is holding right now. 3 times Eugene walked into a courthouse and asked a judge to let him raise his brother's son. 3 times a man in a robe looked at a railroad worker living in a boxcar and said no. And every year after that, Eugene bought a bond with Walter's name on it. Every single year. March, 3rd week, like clockwork. Until 1981. Until the year he died. The pale blue eyes don't blink. The broad hands, scarred across the knuckles from decades of framing and concrete and wire, hold the court papers flat against his thigh. He does not cry. That's not what Walter does. Walter presses the heel of his hand against his right eye, then his left, grinding the pressure in until the sting retreats behind something he can manage. The Zippo turns over in his left hand. Harold Zippo, his father Harold Zippo, and for the first time in 60 years, a question forms that Walter has never once thought to ask. Did Harold know? Did Harold know his own brother was walking into courthouses, filing paperwork, begging judges for custody of Walter? Is that why Harold never mentioned Eugene's name? Not once. Not ever. Not a single time in Walter's entire childhood. Walter turns to the last page of the cigar box documents and finds a carbon copy of a Harlan County Family Court petition dated June 1965. Petitioner, Eugene Albert Coyne. Request, full legal custody of minor Walter Dean Coyne. Status, denied. Reason cited, petitioner is unmarried and employment is irregular, railroad maintenance. Walter presses the heel of his hand against his eyes until the pressure steadies him. Every time he was told, nobody wanted you. Every time, it was a lie. He didn't move for a long time after that. The custody petition sat on the workbench where he'd set it down, carbon ink fading at the edges, and Walter just stood there with both palms flat on the wood, his weight forward, his pale blue eyes fixed on nothing. The dented silver Zippo was in his left hand. He didn't remember picking it up. He turned it over once, twice, 3 times, the metal clicking soft against his calluses, and then he closed his fist around it and breathed. Morning came in through the open boxcar door like it had been waiting for permission. Gray light first, then gold, sliding across the swept concrete of the siding and catching the dust Walter had stirred the night before. The air smelled like old iron and pine sap, and something underneath both. Linseed oil, maybe, soaked into the workbench grains so deep it would never come out. And lying across the threshold of that open door, blocking the light with his body like he owned the place, was a dog. Big, old, a German Shepherd mix with a tan and black coat gone silver-white around the muzzle, ribs just visible beneath the fur, brown eyes calm and absolutely certain. A red nylon collar faded nearly to pink. No tags. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't whine. He just lay there with his chin on his front paws and watched Walter with the kind of patience that only comes from years of showing up to an empty place and waiting anyway. Walter looked at the dog. The dog looked at Walter. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the sleeve of saltine crackers, $1.25 from the gas station in Everts, the last food he had. He broke 2 crackers in half and set them on the floor near the door. The dog lifted his head, sniffed once, and ate them 1 piece at a time, unhurried, like a guest who'd been invited. Then he put his chin back down on his paws and stayed. That was the whole negotiation. Walter used his olive green canvas jacket as a blanket that night, folded on the workbench. He slept maybe 3 hours. When he woke, the dog was still there. Hadn't moved. Just shifted his weight off that stiff left rear hip and settled deeper into the threshold. And when Walter swung his legs off the bench, those brown eyes tracked him without alarm. So Walter got to work. He swept the boxcar floor with a broom he found hanging on the wall. Eugene's broom, bristles worn to a slant from years of the same stroke. He sorted the tools on the pegboard by size and type, the way a man does when he needs his hands busy so his mind can catch up. Wrenches here, screwdrivers there. A hand plane with a rosewood handle so smooth it felt like soap. Around 9, a truck pulled up the gravel siding. Dale Huckabee climbed out carrying a thermos in one hand and a socket set in the other. Stocky, barrel-chested, white hair brushed straight back, tortoiseshell half-moon reading glasses hanging on that beaded chain against his burgundy cardigan. He set the thermos on the workbench, set the socket set beside it. Didn't say good morning. Didn't ask how Walter slept. Walter poured coffee into the thermos cap. It was hot and strong and tasted like someone had made it with intention. "Why are you helping me?" Dale adjusted his reading glasses with one hand and clicked the worn black ballpoint pen clipped to his cardigan pocket. 1 click. That was it. "Eugene kept my furnace running 3 winters straight. Wouldn't take $1. Said a cold house was an emergency, not a transaction." Then he looked at the dog in the doorway and nodded once, like confirming something he already knew. That dog's been showing up at this siding for years, ever since Eugene died. Nobody feeds him regular. He just comes back to the car. Dale left without saying goodbye. That was his way. Walter drank the rest of the coffee standing at the workbench, and then he started on the walls. The pegboard on the east side had been bothering him since the night before. It hung a 1/4 inch proud of the framing, not enough to notice unless you'd spent 40 years hanging drywall and cabinets for other people. He worked his fingers behind the bottom edge and pulled. The pegboard swung out on 2 hidden hinges. Behind it, tucked into a cavity between the studs, were 15 envelopes. Handmade. Each one constructed from brown paper bag material, cut with scissors and glued at the seams with the kind of care that takes twice as long as buying envelopes from a store. Each one had a number written on the front in neat block letters, 2 through 16. Walter's hands were shaking before he opened the first one. Birthday cards. Handmade birthday cards, one for every year of his life from age 2 to age 16, cut from cardstock. Some had drawings, a train, a fishing rod, a dog that looked like it might have been Dutch 20 years younger. Each one signed in the same steady hand. "Happy birthday, Walter, Uncle Gene." Each one contained a $5 bill. None of them were ever mailed. Eugene made them, sealed them, wrote the numbers on the front so he'd remember which year was which, and hid them in the wall of a boxcar on a dead siding in Harlan County, Kentucky. $75 in birthday money for a boy who grew up believing nobody remembered he existed. $75. 15 years. Every single one. Walter sat on the workbench floor with the cards spread across his lap and Dutch lying 3 feet away, and he pressed the heel of his hand against his eyes the same way he had the night before, because some gestures are the only ones a body knows. Now, stay with me here, because what happens next is the part where the math changes. A silver Lexus pulled onto the gravel siding at 11:45. The car was clean in a way that nothing in Harlan County is clean. Dealer washed, waxed, not a speck of road dust on the fenders. The driver's door opened and Keith Coyne stepped out, 6 feet even, lean and angular, sandy blonde hair side-parted and combed like he was heading to a deposition, gray-green eyes, slim navy sport coat over a pale blue button-down, that slim black leather portfolio tucked under his left arm like it was grafted there. Walter's eldest son. Dad. Keith's voice was warm, concerned, practiced. I've been worried sick. That's a beautiful sentence if you don't know what it means. What it means is, the probate attorney called. Keith surveyed the boxcar the way a health inspector surveys a restaurant kitchen, with visible discomfort and the quiet certainty that someone should be cited. His eyes moved across the swept floor, the sorted tools, the workbench, the dog. He did not pet the dog. Dutch did not get up. Walter told him about the bonds. Not the full amount, just that there were bonds. And right there, Keith's eyes changed. The concern stayed on his mouth, but it left his eyes completely, replaced by something quick and calculating, like a register ringing up a total. He stepped outside, made a phone call, spoke quietly, came back in 2 hours with a document he hadn't had when he arrived. Dad, listen to me. You don't have a bank account. You can't just walk into a branch with $300,000 in paper bonds. There are tax implications, penalties. You could lose half of it. He set the portfolio on the workbench and opened it with both hands, revealing a quitclaim form printed on heavy stock. Let me handle this. The family trust is already set up. It's clean, it's legal, it protects you. And here's the thing. Keith isn't wrong about the logistics. He's wrong about everything else. This is the son who didn't return Walter's calls for 3 years. The son who changed the locks on the house Walter built with his own hands after the divorce. The son who told the family court Walter was unstable because a man who loses everything at 60 and sleeps in his car must be unstable, couldn't possibly just be broke. Keith measures love in basis points and calls it generosity. He showed up in a $40,000 car to explain to his father why a man with $211 can't be trusted with his own inheritance. He slid a pen toward Walter. Just sign it, Dad. You'll have the money in a week. Walter looked at the pen. The small cluster of 3 pale freckles on Keith's left cheekbone caught the light from the open door. The faint birthmark on the inside of Keith's right wrist showed where his sleeve rode up against the portfolio. Walter looked at his son. He looked at the unsigned birthday card spread across the workbench behind him. 15 years of love that never reached him because the system said his uncle wasn't good enough. He turned the Zippo over once in his left hand. 5 words. The train car is mine. Keith's Lexus pulls away from the siding in a spray of gravel. Little rocks ping off the rusted coupling at the end of the track. Walter stands in the boxcar doorway with Dutch at his knee, the unsigned quitclaim form on the workbench behind him. The taillights shrink down the access road, brake once at the county blacktop, then disappear left toward town. 5 words. That's all he gave his son. The train car is mine. And now he's standing in the doorway of the thing he owns, watching the dust settle, and the silence that fills up behind Keith's engine is so total it has weight. Dutch shifts against Walter's leg. The old dog's silver muzzle presses into his palm. Walter looks down at him, pale blue eyes deep set beneath those heavy, straight brows, and says nothing. He reaches into the pocket of the olive green canvas jacket and pulls out the dented silver Zippo, turns it over once, twice, puts it back. Here's where we are with the money. Pay attention because the math is going to matter. Walter had $36.25 yesterday morning. He stopped at the mobile station on Route 38, the one that's half gas station, half bait shop, and bought a sleeve of saltines for $1.75 and a gallon jug of water for $5 even. That's $6.75 out, which puts him at $29.50 total in the world. His Social Security check, $842 a month, deposits on the 1st. That's 11 days away. But it deposits into the joint checking account Keith set up 3 years ago when Walter was still married, still living in the house on Deer Creek Lane, still pretending the arrangement was temporary. Keith's name is on that account. Keith controls it. So Walter calls the Social Security Administration from Dale's landline at the hardware store. He sits on the stool behind the register, the phone cord stretched across the counter, and waits on hold for 41 minutes. When a human finally answers, she's kind enough. She tells him the redirect process takes 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks. He thanks her. He hangs up. $29.50 divided by 11 days is $2.68 per day. You can live on that. People have lived on less. But you can't live on that and also fight a legal battle. And that's exactly what Keith is counting on. Dale brings a sandwich around noon, turkey on white bread, mustard, a dill pickle wrapped in wax paper. He sets it on the boxcar's workbench next to the unsigned quitclaim form and walks back out without a word. Doesn't watch, doesn't hover, just the worn black ballpoint pen clipped to his burgundy cardigan catching the light as he turns. Walter eats the sandwich slowly, standing at the workbench, and Dutch gets the last corner of bread. An hour later, a woman walks up the gravel path to the siding. She's small, 5'2" at most, silver-gray hair pulled into a low bun held with a tortoiseshell clip, cream cable-knit sweater over a navy turtleneck. She carries a casserole dish covered in foil with both hands, and at her throat, visible against the cream wool, hangs a tarnished brass skeleton key on a thin leather cord. Margot Evers sets the casserole on the workbench. She doesn't introduce herself. She looks around the boxcar, the safe, the filing cabinet, the cot, the stacked journals, and her pale gray eyes move across everything with the precision of someone conducting an inventory. She touches the brass key at her throat, one finger, lightly. Eugene would have hated the dust. He kept this car like a surgery. Then she leaves, down the gravel, around the bend, gone. Walter stands there holding the Zippo. He doesn't chase her, he doesn't call out, but he heard the name. Eugene. She said it like she'd said it 10,000 times. 3 days later, the motion arrives. Dale reads it aloud at the hardware store counter, his tortoiseshell half-moon glasses low on his nose, the black pen tapping the edge of the paper. Keith Coyne, through his attorney, has filed in Harlan County Probate Court. The filing argues that Walter is financially incapacitated and unable to manage or preserve estate assets of significant value. It requests the court appoint a conservator. The proposed conservator, naturally, is Keith Coyne. Let me say that again so it lands. Keith, the guy in the Navy sport coat and the polished loafers, the guy who slides pens across workbenches like he's doing you a favor, is asking a judge to declare his own father incompetent, to take legal control of everything Eugene left him, the bonds, the boxcar, the siding easement, all of it. Walter listens to every word. He stands at the counter with his hands in the pockets of the canvas jacket, turning the Zippo over against his thigh. The faint birthmark on the right side of his neck, just below his ear, catches the overhead light. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't swear. He's trying to take the car. 5 words again. Walter Coyne is a man who has learned that the world takes more from you when you give it more words to grab. Now, the doubt scene. And if you've stayed with me this far, stay a little longer, because this is the part that almost breaks him. 2 in the morning. The boxcar is cold. October in the Blue Ridge puts frost on iron, and the walls of a Norfolk and Western Railway car are nothing but iron. Walter sits on the floor, his back against the safe, Dutch pressed warm against his right hip. The dog's ribs move slow and steady under Walter's hand. Keith's business card is in the left pocket of the canvas jacket. The quitclaim form is on the workbench. Dale's borrowed phone is in Walter's hand. $29.50. 11 days. 6 to 8 weeks for the redirect. He could sign the form. The $327,412.31 would flow into the Coyne Family Trust. Keith would cut him a check. He could eat a hot meal by tomorrow afternoon, sleep in a bed with sheets, turn a thermostat to 70 and hear the furnace click on like a heartbeat. His thumb hovers over Keith's number. Then his shoulder shifts against the safe, and something inside moves. A soft thud, velvet against steel. The pouch. The one item he pulled from the safe and set aside 3 days ago. The one thing he never opened. At 2:47 a.m., Walter opens the velvet pouch from the safe, the one item he hasn't examined. Inside is a brass pocket watch, engraved on the back, "To Eugene, for 30 years of quiet service, N&W Railway, 1981. And folded inside the watch case, a final letter. Walter unfolds it. The first line reads, "Dear Walter, if you found this, you found everything. Now I need to tell you why." Walter reads Eugene's final letter by the light of the Zippo held above the page, Dutch's breathing the only sound in the boxcar. The flame wavers, the paper is thin, and the handwriting is careful, slow, the letters of a man who left school in the 8th grade, but understood that what he was putting down mattered more than anything he'd ever say out loud. So let me read it to you the way Walter read it, word by word, in Eugene's voice. Dear Walter, if you found this, you found everything. Now I need to tell you why. I never married. People asked, and I told them I was too set in my ways, which was true enough. But the real reason is I spent every dollar I had on 2 things. The people in this county who needed help and couldn't ask for it. And trying to get you. I went to the court 3 times, 1966, 1969, 1972. 3 times they told me a single man working for the railroad was not a suitable guardian. 3 times I drove home and sat in this car and decided I was not going to let that be the end of it. So I bought the bonds, one at a time, every year, because I knew no judge could stop you from being a grown man someday, and when you were, I wanted you to have something that proved I was here the whole time. I couldn't be the good guy when it mattered. Figured I could at least not be the other thing. Walter's hand is shaking. The Zippo flame dips. Dutch shifts closer, pressing his silver muzzle against Walter's knee, and Walter steadies the lighter with both hands. The letter continues. There's things you don't know. Your shop class at Harlan High, senior year, those tools came from me. I routed them through the Kiwanis so nobody would ask questions. Your first apartment in Roanoke, the deposit, I wired it through Mount Olive Baptist's Emergency Housing Fund. The $400 that showed up in your bank account the month Claire got her diagnosis, that was me, through the Veterans Aid Society. I know you thought it was an error. It wasn't an error. I have been carrying you your whole life, Walter, not because you couldn't walk, because nobody else was going to make sure the road was there. Think about that for a second. Every time Walter told himself he'd gotten lucky, every time he figured some clerical mix-up or some anonymous charity had thrown him a bone, every time he scraped by and thought it was dumb chance, it was Eugene. A man he barely remembered. A man the courts told 3 times he wasn't good enough. Sitting in a boxcar with a ledger and a pen, routing money through churches and civic clubs and veterans funds like a one-man underground railroad for his own nephew's survival. The letter ends with 6 words. There's always somebody colder than you are. Find them. Walter folds the letter against his chest. He presses it there with both palms flat, the way you'd hold a wound closed. His pale blue eyes are shut. The Zippo is dark. Dutch is breathing and the winter wind outside and nothing else. He sits like that for a long time. Now. The probate hearing. Harlan County Courthouse 9 days later. Courtroom B, second floor. The kind of room where the radiator clanks every 40 seconds and the fluorescent lights make everyone look like they owe money. Walter walks in wearing the olive green canvas jacket and the gray Henley and the scuffed brown work boots. He has not bought new clothes. He has not shaved differently. The dented silver Zippo is in his left jacket pocket, and he turns it once before he sits down. Keith Coyne walks in like he's attending a board meeting. Navy sport coat, pale blue button-down, slim black leather portfolio tucked under his left arm. Behind him, an attorney in a charcoal suit carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than Walter's truck. Keith's gray-green eyes scan the courtroom the way you'd scan a restaurant menu, already knowing what you want, annoyed it isn't on the table yet. Dale Huckabee sits in the gallery, burgundy cardigan buttoned to the throat, worn black ballpoint pen clipped to the breast pocket. Beside him, Margot Evers, cream cable knit sweater over navy turtleneck, the tarnished brass skeleton key resting against her collarbone on its leather cord, hands folded in her lap. Keith's attorney goes first. Financial incapacity. Diminished judgment. A 60-year-old man living in a dead man's boxcar with a stray dog, claiming ownership of bonds he found in a floor safe. The attorney uses the phrase, vulnerable adult, 4 times. He uses the word confused 3 times. He never once says Walter's name without putting my client's father in front of it, like Walter only exists in relation to Keith, like he's not a person, just a problem attached to a portfolio. Damn near makes your teeth itch, doesn't it? Walter's testimony takes less than 2 minutes. He stands. He speaks plainly. My uncle tried to raise me 3 times. The court said no 3 times. He spent the rest of his life making sure I'd have something anyway. I'm not signing it over. The judge, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses and no patience for theater, asks one question. Mr. Coyne, what do you intend to do with the bonds? Walter, cash enough to live, keep the rest in the car where he put them, and keep the ledger going. 9 words that carry more financial planning than Keith's attorney managed in 20 minutes. Then Margot stands. She identifies herself as the daughter of Alma Creech, the woman whose $3,200 surgery Eugene paid for in 1974. She has carried the brass skeleton key since she was 20 years old. She holds it up, the leather cord swinging gently. Eugene gave it to her mother and said, "If anything happens to me, make sure the right coin gets in." Margot has been waiting 42 years to hand it over. Her voice does not waver. Her pale gray eyes do not leave the judge's face. The ruling takes 4 minutes. Estate transfer upheld. Conservatorship motion denied. Walter is competent. The bonds are his. The boxcar is his. The ledger is his. The probate hearing ends. The judge rules the estate transfer valid, Walter competent, the conservatorship motion denied. Keith stands in the hallway of the courthouse. Margot walks past him and stops. She pulls a yellowed index card from her cardigan pocket and hands it to him. On it, in Eugene's handwriting, Keith Harold Coyne, tuition, Eastern Kentucky University, fall 1984, $2,400, paid in full. Keith stares at the card. The cluster of 3 pale freckles on his left cheekbone catches the fluorescent light. He covers his mouth with one hand. He sits down on the courthouse bench and does not speak. If you've made it this far, stay with me, because what happens next is the part I've been waiting to tell you. 3 weeks after the hearing, Walter cashed 4 of the 16 bonds. $47,223. He deposited every cent into a new account at Harlan County Federal Credit Union, and the teller's hands shook harder than his did. The remaining 12 bonds went back into the safe. The ledger stayed on the workbench, open to the last page Eugene had written on, because Walter wasn't done reading it. He was done needing to. He started with the floor, ripped out the weak planking where the rain had gotten in for years, replaced it board by board with pressure-treated lumber Dale brought on a flatbed without being asked. The tortoiseshell half-moon glasses caught the morning light as Dale backed the truck up to the siding, that worn black ballpoint pen clipped to his burgundy cardigan like always. They didn't talk about the hearing. They didn't talk about Keith. Dale handed Walter a socket set and said, "Stove goes against the east wall. Draws better." That was the whole conversation. Walter painted the door. Not the whole boxcar, just the door. A deep, clean red, the color of something that wanted to be seen. He used a brush, not a roller, because Eugene would have used a brush. Dutch watched from the cot, lying on a wool blanket Walter had bought for $6 at the Salvation Army in Everts. The old shepherd's muzzle had gone almost entirely silver-white now, and he moved with that stiff-legged gait, favoring the left rear hip, but his brown eyes tracked every stroke of the brush like he was making sure it was done right. When Walter finished, Dutch walked to the door, sniffed the wet paint, and lay down across the threshold. Good enough. Then the people started coming. A man named Combs showed up first, 70-something, bent at the waist, driving a truck older than Walter's lighter. He backed up to the siding, unloaded a full cord of firewood by himself, and drove away without a word. Didn't wave, didn't wait to be thanked, just left the wood stacked tight against the boxcar's north wall like he'd been planning the dimensions for years. 2 days later, a woman named Bledsoe. She carried a quilt up the gravel path, hand-stitched, double wedding ring pattern, backing worn, soft as skin. She set it on the workbench and said, "My mother made this for Eugene in 1968. He kept her lights on that whole winter. She'd want it back where it belongs." Then she left. A mechanic named Tackett drove up in a flatbed with a second wood stove, better than the one Dale had installed, cast iron, still blackened from use. He climbed down, pushed his cap back, and looked at the red door for a long time. "Eugene kept my shop open in '72, told me to pass it on. Took me 50 years, but here I am." 5 sentences. 50 years of debt settled in a gravel lot beside a railroad siding. Each one carried a single line. Each line was a name from the ledger walking back to life. Walter opened a new page. His handwriting was nothing like Eugene's. Bigger, rougher, the letters of a man who'd spent 40 years holding hammers instead of pens. The first entry: $200 to Harlan County Food Bank, November 2024. The second: $75 to Dale Huckabee, repayment for socket set, coffee, and 30 years of Eugene's friendship. Dale looked at the entry over his reading glasses, clicked his pen once. "No." Walter wrote, "Refused, paid in kindness," beside it, and clicked Dale's pen right back at him for emphasis. Dale snorted. That was the whole negotiation. Then Keith came back. Not in the Lexus, a rental. Some forgettable sedan he parked 50 yards from the siding, like he wasn't sure he had permission to come closer. No slim black leather portfolio tucked under his left arm. No sport coat, just a pale blue button-down, untucked, and that cluster of 3 pale freckles on his left cheekbone, catching the late autumn light as he stood at the edge of the gravel for a long time. A long damn time. Walter saw him from the workbench. He didn't move, didn't call out, just turned the dented silver Zippo over once in his left hand and waited. Keith walked to the boxcar, stood in the doorway, looked at the red door, the ledger, the plaque space on the wall, the dog on the blanket. His mouth opened and closed once before anything came out. I didn't know about any of it. The tuition, the tools, any of it. Walter said nothing. "You built that house with your hands." Keith's voice cracked on the word hands. "I knew that. I knew it when I changed the locks." He did not ask to be forgiven. Walter did not offer it, but he poured a second cup of coffee from the percolator on the stove and set it on the workbench. Keith sat on the folding chair. They did not speak for a long time. Dutch walked between them, turned once and lay down on the floor with his chin touching both their boots. "If you've made it this far, stay with me, because this is the part I've been waiting to tell you." Months passed. The boxcar became something, not a business, not a charity, not a shelter with a name or a tax ID, just a place. Walter stocked a shelf with canned goods, wool blankets, thick socks, and bus passes he bought in packs of 10. The ledger filled with new entries every week, each one in his rough hand. Margot brought a brass plaque she'd had made, the tarnished skeleton key on its leather cord resting against her cream sweater as she held it out. It read, Eugene A. Coyne. He left people standing. Walter bolted it to the boxcar wall beside the red door and didn't say a word. Margot touched the plaque once with her fingertips and walked back to her car. Then, one evening in early December, a rusted Buick pulled up to the siding at dusk. Cracked taillight, a duffel bag in the passenger seat, a woman behind the wheel with $11 in her pocket, and the look Walter knew better than his own face, the look of someone who has been driving away from something for so long they forgot they were also driving toward nothing. She got out, stood in the gravel, looked at the red door, the light inside, the plaque. Is this the place someone told me about? Walter set a coffee mug on the workbench, pulled the folding chair out of the boxcar. You eat yet? Dutch walked to the Buick and lay down beside the front tire. The light inside the boxcar was on. Eugene Coyne lived in a boxcar for 24 years. He died owing nothing to anyone and being owed by everyone. That was the richest a man could be. Walter Coyne was thrown out at 60 with $88 and a lighter that didn't belong to him. Turns out it did. It all did. The legacy isn't the bonds or the train car or the safe bolted to the floor. It's the act of keeping a promise no one asked you to keep, for someone who may never know you kept it. Home is not where you're born. It's where you stop running. The light is still on. The door is open.